Good, glorious morning, everyone. So I just kind of sort of had to make this video. So, welcome to Lavender House presentation. Today's subject is going to be, who are you? Okay, and I say that with enthusiasm and hopefully conviction. Late yesterday afternoon, I was reading something about names. What's in a name? And I did a speech some time ago. I think it was for one of my friends' graduating classes. And I think I remember. I titled it, Who You Am. And it was about the subject that I'm talking about today. And so this has come full circle because when I wrote that presentation up, I was working at MD Anderson, and on my breaks, on my lunch break, I would take it out to the park and write it up. And so today I'm actually at the Veterans Hospital premises. My son is having a procedure, so I have a few moments. And I realized that this subject matter is taking full circle in absolutely everything, even down to the location, because I'm really, really close to the location of the MD Anderson campus. So, you know, when God puts things in order, or when you realize the order of things in your life, okay, it's overwhelmingly amazing. So I'm not going to be using these. Oh gosh, I can take them off. Woo! So there I am in all of my glory, which brings me back to my subject. So on late yesterday evening, I was reading something about names, and right now I can't remember precisely what it was. I'm pretty sure it was on YouTube or something like that. But it was talking about, who are you? Oh, I do remember. It was a YouTube presentation about calling on the name of the Lord, calling on the name of God. And when I listened to it, and then when I woke up this morning, I thought about it. Because, so I'll take you back to the kind of the origin of the story so that you can recognize. Because one of the questions that popped into my mind when I was listening to that, because it said, repeat the name of the Lord all throughout the day. And I thought, okay, what's the name of the Lord? What's the name of God? You know? And I thought, Jehovah. And I thought, Yahweh. And I thought, Yeshua. And I kid you not, right away, I got the message in my spirit. The name of God is I Am. And this is the name that God told Moses to call. So, because Moses said, who am I to do this? And they're going to ask me, what's the name of this God? You know, because all the deities had names, okay? All the false gods, all the gods that the Egyptians knew had names. And so Moses was concerned that Pharaoh and Pharaoh's spiritual guides would say, what is the name of this God? And God told Moses to say, tell them I am has sent you. Okay, so in part of that exercise, it said to call upon the name of God throughout the day, followed by your name. Now, I don't know if you know, but I have to tell you the story again. When my son had the possibility of being shipped to London for his academic studies for the priesthood, I was like, okay, Lord, I need a passport because they cannot send my baby that far away from me and I can't get to it. And so I went to apply for a passport, which led to me digging up my adoption records and all this kind of stuff. Mother was living at the time. And I asked her, but bless her heart, she couldn't remember what became of my original birth certificate. So I had to go digging through some records, and I went to Hardin County where my records were filed, and of course that led me to a dead end, pretty much, except for the fact that there was the original birthplace, which was one of the things that brought up the flags with my passport, because I was born in 1956 in Kinder, Louisiana, however, or Lake Charles, Louisiana. However, my birth certificate was filed in 1959 in Hardin County, Texas. And so that brought up red flags, which meant that I needed to go look a little further. As I did that, I was meeting my son in Mississippi for a little bit of a vacation, and when I was coming back, my girlfriend said, "Oh, weren't you looking for?" I was talking on the phone. She says, "Weren't you looking for your birth certificate?" And I said, "Yes." She says, "Well, you're right there in New Orleans, so it would be. You look at the Bureau of Statistics, and it should be right there in New Orleans." And I was like, "Whoa." So I kid you not, it was not 5 minutes later that I came upon a sign to take an exit that would lead me right to, okay, that Bureau of Statistics in the capital of in the city of New Orleans. And so when I got there, there was absolutely nobody in the room, and this was like maybe 11 o'clock in the morning, maybe even noon, okay? And there were chairs like, normally would be filled up with people. There was nobody in the room. And so I walked up to the window, and the lady said, I explained everything, to her. And she said, okay, so she was putting things into the computer. She says, "Yes, we did receive your packet. Because I sent over all of my information." She says, we have already mailed you one. I says, "But I've been out of town for a couple of days." And she says, "Well, it was only just mailed like yesterday, day before yesterday, something like that." And she says, "I can print you off one." And so when she brought it back, she says, "Can you help me establish your identity? What's your name?" And I said, "There's so many typographical errors in my files." I says, "Borkston, Braxton, I says, and she says, No. I'm talking about your first name. Do you know your first name?" I says, "Oh yeah, it's Gloria." And she says, "Well, I think you're really going to like this." She pushes my original birth certificate under the little window there, and I looked at my first name. And my first name is Glory, Glory. I was overwhelmed. And I had been reading a book called The Shack. And there was a line, I promise, that raised up off the page and lit up for me. I marked it with a yellow highlighter later, and it's always stuck with me because the character that was playing the part of God said to the character as Mac in that story, he says, you know, I'm especially fond of you. So when I walked out of that place, out of that building that day, the sun was shining. It was a perfectly clear blue sky, and I was skipping like a 6-year-old child and looking up at the sky, holding my original birth certificate in my hand and saying, I think you're especially fond of me. So now, as I come back down to earth, stop and think about your name, your given name. And I started doing much research on my name, all my marriage names, the names that my sons have, okay? And I realized, you know, none of this ever happened by mistake. So I encourage you to maybe do a little research and look back and see, what does your name mean? Because you've been called that name all of your life. And even when I was called Gloria, okay, it's a derivative. Well, I'll follow up on that story because my Aunt Mary, who can still speak French, was telling me a story, and I had not told her about my birth certificate. Was telling me a story one day about because I said, and Mary, you know I'm psychic, right? And she says, yeah. And I looked at her and I thought, wow, really? And she goes, yeah. She says, you have a gift. She says, as a matter of fact, you have some gifts. And she goes, and I says, so how did you know? And she says, because your mama had some gifts. She said she had one. She could see dead people. And I do recognize the gift of clairvoyance in my life. So she was telling me, and I said, so what happened? Because none of you ever practiced this or ever said anything about psychic. She goes, well, we were raised Catholic, and that was a no-no. She says, I can remember so many times that Mama, their mother, would wake them up and make them get on their knees and pray, because she said that she saw the devil in the tree outside, and just certain things. But when I says, so do you remember the prayer? She says, well, it was in French. And I says, I don't care if you remember it, say it. I love to hear it. And so she started speaking the prayer, and it resonated within my very being. And so I thought, I think I almost understand that. And she goes, well, yeah, our language was not too far from the English that we speak. But now our family heritage had their own language. They call it Creole, but they were in an area where the whole settlement, had their own language. Unfortunately, we're losing the culture of it now. But anyway, so I said, so she also explained, she says, just like you call me Aunt Mary, if you said it in the Creole, it would be Tante Marie. And I said, really? And she said, sure. And I said, so how would you say my name in the Creole? And she said, Glory. And I said, so Mama really named me Glory? And she goes, yes. And I thought, oh my goodness. And once again, the thought came to me, you're especially fond of me. So that's one to today. I'm thinking about names. And just the thought brings me into an attitude of gratitude for the enormous mercy and grace. And so when I speak to people today, and if anyone were to ask me my name, or were to ask me, who are you? And they very well may in a short while, when I have to pick up my son from his procedure, they might ask me, who are you? And my response would be, I am Glory. And with that occasion, I would be allowed to pick up my son. The door would be open for me. So when you think about your name, your given name today, and just focusing on your first name, when you know what that means, because it was not given to you by chance. And with that name, you can set the captives free. With that name, you can call upon the Spirit of God that dwells within you. You can call upon the power of God that dwells within you. It's very difficult not to be emotional. When I think of I am Glory. So when I was celebrating Islam, I chose names based on the attributes of God according to the Islamic I don't know what you call it now, but it was 100 attributes of God. And I chose Allah, Malik, or Malika, Hamid. And the translation of those three words, my first name, my middle name, and my last name, were glorious queen who praises God. Well, when I explained it to my children, I was baking cookies, and I had just set a batch on the on the table, and I had just finished explaining that my Muslim name meant glorious one who praises her God, glorious queen who praises her God. And they said, I want to say it was Christopher that probably did that, said, well, glorious mama queen whatever, I'll praise God a lot better if you let me have some of them cookies. So recognize your name today. And if you don't like your name, you can actually change it. So I mentioned to a friend a few days ago, well, maybe months ago now. We were talking about something, and I said, I am Jesus. And I said it with a boldness that we were standing outside, and I even stepped back because that was a bold statement, even for a Christian, because most of the time we don't walk in the fullness of what that actually means. But you can say, I am Jesus, because it's the same Spirit that lives in you. I am glory. Now I'll take you a little bit deeper in the search, because when I looked up my surnames, they also line up with who I am. If I chose the surname that I was born under, which would have been Braxton, it had to do with a town, and I think it was, I know it was Scottish descent, and people with the name of Braxton would have dwelled on land where they served others by growing food. We might call them sharecroppers for today, but they provided food for people. So those of you that know me could put this together. Now, and if I went through my adopted surname, it was Beatty, and it was right along the similar lines of Irish, Scottish descent, and I can't remember all the details right now, but Beatty was in there, and it falls into line with who I am now. And then McCrae is the last name that I've carried for the past over 30 years now. And so every time I've signed my name or been called by my name, it's Mrs. McCrae, it's Miss McCrae. And so I looked that one up too. So you have an assignment, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be very, very real. And if you don't like the meaning of your name, give God the full privilege of changing your name. And give yourself the full privilege of changing your name. People do it all the time. You can get a lawyer and change your name, because if your name is something hideous or destructive or something that you don't particularly care for, or something that pronounces struggle, or if you cannot find the divinity within who you am, change your name. Child of God, beloved child of God, that is what I call you today. That's about enough of this for now. I hope that I've inspired you to call upon the name of God all day, followed by your name, and recognize who you are. There was the little monkey in Lion King, when he found Simba. He conked him on the head and he goes, "You don't even know who you are." Oh my, how many of us don't even know who we are? I encourage you to find some time today, get to know who you are, and have another glorious day.